Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with another entry of Wolfulair News, an unscripted series where I talk about the latest shit happening in the world of horror. I just came off of my biggest video ever, the Halloween Mega Review, and now I'm gonna be getting back to a regular schedule. Right now, though, Goulash is making a new Gulag on Doom Patrol, so brace yourselves for that shit, y'all. In this entry of Wolfulair News, though, I'm gonna be chatting about the trailers for IT Chapter II and Watchmen's HBO show. Alrighty. Let's jump into the first story.
Hello.
Yep, the trailer for the long-awaited It sequel finally dropped, and of course this sequel will be dealing with the adult incarnations of the losers of the first film. Now, the trailer pretty much opens with an extended scene from the movie, featuring Jessica Chastain's Beverly returning to her home after all these years, and the scene is a little, iffy to me. It just kind of comes off as a standard horror situation where there's like some kind of weird sort of fucking grudge little kid wandering around in the background. I don't know. It just comes off a little silly, a little goofy. I mean, it is kind of cool to see just this extended sequence from the film, pretty much unedited. Like, it's unusual, and it has this great tension and sort of this awkwardness involving Jessica Chastain's character just sort of hanging out with this old lady. There is that, but I'm just not really feeling the little guy wandering around the background. I don't know, it's just a little too basic. After that scene is over, though, the trailer does give a glimpse at all the adult losers finally, years later, returning to Derry. Now, even though we're finally being introduced to the adult losers, the trailer still leverages the young losers. I think they still have a prominent role in this film, which is a good thing because they're kind of the more compelling aspect of it, and they're also our entry point into this new film. Like, we don't necessarily know anything about the adult versions. We're not necessarily emotionally attached to the adult version of Bill, so it's nice to still have that connection. This wouldn't necessarily have been a problem if there was more of an attempt to combine the two films into one cohesive experience. You know, just having the adult versions appear somewhere in the first film, it wouldn't have been a problem if it was a bit more structured like the original book. But I feel like with more focus on the adults, it's gonna potentially lack the appeal of the first film, which was just kids facing this otherworldly threat, this sort of monstrous clown. Like, I feel like that's a bit more appealing than adults going after it. There's less of a sense of vulnerability with adults fighting this fucking clown. I mean, it's a clown, just beat the shit out of it. And if kids could eventually take down this clown, like, what's gonna stop the adult versions? I don't know. And overall, I do feel like this is gonna be the lesser of the two films because I think the adult sections of it are the weaker parts of the story. I might be alone in that. But of course, Bill Skarsgård is returning as Pennywise, and he was honestly a bright spot of the first film, but I still do not like the look of Pennywise in these movies. I just think Pennywise looks like some kind of fucking anime clown. He's just got a gigantic head like a Code Lyoko character, and then in this new movie, it seems like it's even bigger. Like, they wanted to try something out with the first movie by having him have a big head, and now that the people have sort of accepted it, they're trying to just swing for the fucking fences and make it an even bigger fucking head. But the look of Pennywise in these movies is iconic, and you can't really change it at this point. So even though I don't like it, I realize a lot of people like it. A lot of people want Pennywise's Clussy. Like, I can't fucking deny that. Like, there's just a lot of people who want that fucking Clussy, and I'm not gonna deny them. Just never really appealed to me, that look, though. Not really in the slightest. But Bill Skarsgård's performance is something I am looking forward to seeing in this film. Ultimately, though, I do feel like with these two It movies, they should have shot this as just one big movie, kind of like Lord of the Rings, where it's back to back. So they could have released this second movie, like, right away the next year. So the first movie would still be fresh in all of our minds, and there'd still be this really big hype. I don't know, I feel like Chapter 2 is not gonna be as big of a hit as the first chapter, just because it's been a couple years. Visually, though, I do have to say that this trailer is very promising. It does look like a very nice film, and the effects also look really cool, and I'm hoping that there's gonna be a little fewer CGI effect shots in the sequel. Yeah, the CGI effect shots didn't really work for me in the first chapter. I'm really hoping they improve on that front. But I am looking forward to this new chapter. I overall enjoyed the first film. I had some problems with it, but the first film, it's gonna be a pretty hard act to follow. I don't know, I feel like this sequel is gonna maybe be good, but still kinda disappoint people. We'll see. But let's move on to the next story, shall we?
We are no one. We are everyone. And we are invisible.
Of course, the trailer for the new Watchmen HBO series also dropped pretty recently. And honestly, I kind of doubted that this show is actually going to be made. It just seemed kind of unlikely, just one of those projects that's sort of announced or in development that doesn't really go anywhere. But yeah, we have a fucking Watchmen TV show that's coming out soon. And it's not really like any other Watchmen property released so far. It's very different from anything the series has seen thus far. One of the jarring aspects of the new Watchmen series, though, is just the fact that it was initially announced alongside the real sequel, the comic sequel, Doomsday Clock. Much like Doomsday Clock, this new show is also a sequel to Watchmen, only it's a bit more of an alternate universe sequel. And honestly, I don't consider it a real sequel in the same way I consider Doomsday Clock a sequel. Even though Doomsday Clock takes place partially in the mainstream DC universe, it's still more of a sequel to me because it's at least a comic. I don't consider anything not a comic to be canon to Watchmen. I agree with Alan Moore in the sense that ultimately, if you're telling a true Watchmen story, it has to be a fucking comic. It's just the medium that Watchmen is meant to be told in. But, you know, I'm totally down with that TV show presenting an alternate take on a continuation of Watchmen. But enough of that, let me talk about the actual trailer for this new Watchmen show already, okay? The trailer opens showing a legion of Rorschachs. If you're not familiar with the comics, Rorschach is this sort of crazy masked vigilante that's on the edge, and he died in the events of Watchmen, and he wrote a journal that revealed all of the crazy shit that was going on during Watchmen. Supposedly, in this new show, these Rorschachs are inspired by the original Rorschach and his journal, which is leaked by the New Frontiersmen, and I guess they all get together, they start a movement. It's not totally clear what it is in the trailer, but I'm sure it's very inspired by, I guess, political movements today. It should be interesting to see an army of people inspired by a dead superhero and continuing his legacy either in a negative or positive fashion. Now, as well as the legion of Rorschachs, the cops in the show are also shown to be all wearing yellow masks. It's possible that they're inspired by the comedian. It's a distinct possibility, or it could just be the side thing. I feel like wearing yellow, not the best tactical choice, but okay, whatever. With the Rorschachs and the police, it seems like this show is definitely going to be focusing more on a masked vigilante aspect of Watchmen. Like, this isn't going to be a superhero exploration necessarily. It's going to be sort of just focusing on the idea of people wearing masks and doling out vigilante justice. Not necessarily traditional superheroes like you would see in a comic book. And I think that's an interesting take on Watchmen, focusing on just that specific aspect and not necessarily the idea that, okay, what if superheroes were real? Instead, what if there were just a whole bunch of people wearing masks and trying to, I guess, deal out justice? Because superheroes are fucking everywhere in media now. Doing it this way would at least separate it from all the other superhero programs and make it a bit more subtle and not rely on capes and costumes and masks and garish stuff. Like, just sort of break it down to the fundamentals. One of the unfortunate things that's apparent from watching the trailer, though, is that it's definitely going to be losing the neo-noir feel of the comic. Yeah, it definitely has more of a Western vibe overall, which is definitely a change of tone from the comic. Now, notably, the show seems to be depicting a world that's post-Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan has left the Earth supposedly permanently, and he's just sort of left Earth to its own devices. Like, they just have to figure shit out on their own. But unfortunately, I guess Dr. Manhattan didn't really count on the idea of Rorschach's journal getting out. So I'd imagine the world in this new Watchmen show is pretty much on the brink of Armageddon. Point is, though, this show does have that apocalyptic vibe of the original comic. Now, in addition to the apocalyptic vibe of the trailer, the show might also be depicting a totalitarian world. It's very clear if the police are all wearing masks and shit, there's gotta be some shit up with the government. I mean, if it was a world in the comic where Richard Nixon was being elected like 6 times or whatever, it's gotta be a fucked up world by now. And it seems like characters will be returning from both the original Watchmen and possibly reimagined from Doomsday Clock as well. Jeremy Irons, of course, is going to be playing Ozymandias, and just like in Doomsday Clock, he has cancer, so I guess that'll be interesting. But Ozymandias is like the key Watchmen character. He's the one that sets off all the shitty events of the comic. He's the villain, so I guess we'll see how much of an impact he has on the series beyond the obvious impacts. Now, interestingly enough, supposedly Marionette and Mime are going to be on this show. They are newer characters from the sequel Doomsday Clock, so I'm assuming if they are actually going to be on this series, they're going to be reimagined, because I can't imagine Doomsday Clock and this new show coexisting. Seems kind of neat that this show is potentially taking ideas from this new comic. Something that really irks me about Doomsday Clock is that they haven't really shown what happens with Night Owl and Silk Spectre, and that's something I've been wondering for a while, and it seems like they're never gonna have those characters appear, but they were pretty much sort of teased in the original comic as being the main focus of a potential Watchmen sequel. It just hasn't fucking happened. I'm wondering if this show is gonna have Night Owl and Silk Spectre or their descendants at all. I guess we'll see. I mean, it's possible. It just seems like such a weird, obvious thing to do in a sequel and just not have it happen? That's strange. And finally, Regina King is gonna be on this show, but she's gonna be playing a new vigilante character. I'm not sure who, and maybe it isn't new, maybe it is a pre-existing character or a new incarnation of a pre-existing character, because Watchmen does that quite a bit. And I like the costume that Regina King wears. To me, it's much more true to the costume designs of the comic. That was something I didn't like about the movie, is that the costume designs were just very fucking slick and stylish, but this show seems pretty promising with the look. But overall, this HBO Watchmen show looks like a totally new take, and I am looking forward to seeing how it turns out as a Watchmen fan. Well, that's all the time I have for this episode of Wolfulair News. Now, what do you think of IT Chapter 2 in the HBO Watchmen series? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, like it, but if you loved it, subscribe for more and click that fucking bell to get notifications on future vids. Also, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. Finally, if you can, pledge to my Patreon to help the channel grow and also get some goodies. On Sunday, to tie into Mother's Day, I'm gonna be streaming the original Friday the 13th to my $3 silver supporters on Patreon. So if you wanna watch some Friday the 13th with me and hang out, consider pledging. Alright, that's all I have to say. I've been your host, Dr. Wolfula, signing out. See you next time!